HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
Today's program is brought to you by Korin, a supplier of Japanese chef knives and restaurant supplies. For more information, visit korin.com.
Hi guys, I'm Jamie Oliver and you're listening to Heritage Radio Network, a member-supported podcast network broadcasting over 35 weekly shows live from Bushwick, Brooklyn. This year, HRN is celebrating 10 years of food radio. How amazing. For the past decade, they've been taking you behind the scenes of farms, restaurants, breweries, school cafeterias, and so much more. It's been 10 years, and they're just getting started. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guest is Stephen Bitterolf. We'll talk to Stephen about Riesling Fire, Von Boden. We'll talk to him about his love for Teutonic wines and more. For our weekly wine sip, I don't know what the hell we're going to taste. Stephen brought in a bag of wine, so we'll drink through that during the show. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. All right, hailing from Pennsylvania, Stephen Bitterolf left New York to study art, eventually becoming an artist. True. His love and interest in wine brought him from art to wine, working in retail and ultimately wine importation. Stephen is the creator of Riesling Fire, a celebration of Riesling, and the proprietor of Von Boden, a boutique wine import company specializing in German wines, among others. Welcome to the Grape Nation, Stephen.
Thank you, Sam. Good to be here, man.
Great to have you. I think the best way for our audience to get to know you is for you to give us a little background, as I ask all my guests, about your journey in life and wine that got you to really where you are today, which is throwing this great Riesling fair and your boutique importation company. But it was an interesting road. So
yeah, it was not direct.
Yeah,
for sure. So how did it start? I mean, any journey in wine starts with drinking a lot, drinking probably too much. But before that, so I think you mentioned in the intro, I left New York to study art. I came to New York.
You came to New York.
Yeah, so basically I grew up for the most part in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And then after that, went to Penn State.
Sorry about the Steelers.
Yeah, honestly, I don't follow sports at all. So
Good.
I went to Penn State, which is a huge football town, and never went to a game. Studied art history. I mean, it's
There's why.
Yeah, dude. I wore, it's like I wore a lot of black and didn't go to any of that shit. Can I swear or no?
Yeah.
Okay. And then studied art history. The plan, so far as I had a plan, was to get my PhD in art history. I went to Chicago. I did an internship at the Art Institute of Chicago. I came to New York specifically to study contemporary German painting with one very specific professor. He said no, and then I kind of didn't know it. The plan had been like A to B to C to D. You know, it's like it was all very well laid out, at least in my head. And then when that happened, I didn't know what the hell to do because I was in New York. I was waiting on tables. The plan was in the fall to do that, and then the door was closed there. So, boom.
That was it, huh?
So I was, at the same time I was drawing, I was doing pretty big drawings.
Always drawing, or kind of started?
Yeah, I'd never in my life, and still haven't ever taken a studio art class, so I don't have any formal training whatsoever. But I was doing big drawings, and a lot, it's like, I come from a kind of middle-class Pittsburgh family,
right?
As did Andy Warhol, I guess. But it was like art as a career was not, it just wasn't something people talked about ever, right? So it seemed incomprehensible and improbable. So yeah, I was doing big drawings. I had a room full of them, but never honestly did I ever think of selling them or that would be anything feasible or possible. But then people started buying them.
How? I mean, how they friends?
It's like, yeah, you hang out with people in New York, you meet some people who are collectors. I was in that world, right? So you meet people at openings, you go to studios, that sort of shit. And I wasn't making that much work. So yeah, I started selling it, and then I got a gallery, and then it kind of
gallery to represent.
I had a gallery, yeah. I had a gallery in New York and one in London,
cool.
And sold it. I don't know. I sold some work. I could pay the bills for a little bit with that shit.
Really?
Yeah, for a few years. And then I got through that. I was already into wine. I was waiting on tables. It was all part of the world, and doing it on the cheap. I know this sounds like very fancy, but it was it was
go back for a second. I mean, no family influence on wine, no around the table stuff, or was it any of that? Was New York the place where you were exposed to it, working tables and it being around?
Yeah, I would say kind of 100%. Interestingly, my father's from Austria. So my father's Austrian, and presumably, we didn't really speak about it that much, but presumably drank a lot of white wine growing up. And so when he came to the U.S., he fell in love with really powerful red wines. So certainly wine was a part of the dinner table, but not neither in a way of connoisseurship. Right. So he wouldn't present to me a Burgundy.
More of just
it was there was always wine on the table, and it was
right.
If you wanted a schlug, you got it, but it was not a formal thing. My father drank Magnums that were $10 and less, and like the Shiraz, right? It was just that was I think after being raised in Austria in the 50s and 60s and having a lot of really insipid white wines, wanted some alcohol and fruit, and there it goes.
So here's the part I don't get. I mean, your whole life is about wine. I mean, what was that moment? I mean, we didn't finish the art thing. I mean, you had a gallery represent you, you're drinking. When was the moment where you knew wine, this is cool, or I never had this? Was it a specific wine? Was it a time? I mean, why and when?
Yeah, no, there's no specific. There's no it was a
moment.
Sam, it was a 1961
right.
Palmer. No, it was. I mean, I would say it was probably a German Riesling, or German wines back in the
right.
that were just that changed how I perceived what you could experience through wine. Insofar as they had residual sugar, they had so much acidity. There was this this yin yang.
And you're making sense of all of this back then. We're thinking a little about it.
I was registering it as a really phenomenal experience.
Well, register is a fair word.
Exactly.
Too.
Yeah.
All right. So the art thing is, gallery representation, selling a little. Get me to the transitions now, the wine, and keep going.
Yes. Okay. So the short story, because this would be a very long story.
Okay.
The short version is basically that the gallery world, I was successful enough to keep the lights on and have kind of cup of noodles, but was not wildly successful, or even was really not even that successful.
Okay.
All right, let's put this in context.
Honest.
And got more and more into wine. Felt like it just seemed more interesting. And to be honest, now looking back, there's some logic to it, right? I get more into wine. And I got more into wine both from the tasting. I was drinking and buying a lot, right? And collecting on a very humble level. I'd have a case of wine around. I would be very conscientious of what I was drinking, interested in this wine or that. They might be a $5, $10, $15 bottle of wine, but I was interested in where it came from, who was making it, right? So collecting on that more
inquisitive,
cerebral level, yeah. and was interested in where they came from and like why wines from Germany were different than Italy, different than Spain, different from France. I was interested in the geography. I was interested in the history of it. I was interested in the language. And that is kind of like, that is what I did in art history. That is art history, right?
Right.
And to some extent, whether you're studying a painting or a sculpture from Italy or from France or from Germany or a wine, they're cultural products, right? And so it kind of
More than people know.
Yeah, for sure, right? There's a reason Italian wine tastes different than German wine. There's a reason that the German Renaissance looks different than the Italian Renaissance, right? These are cultural artifacts, and that was the fascination. That what drew me in. And looking back, it's like, yeah, man, I just threw out art history and brought in wine. Because it's a similar thing. You get to travel, you get to work on language, you get to work on history, you get to work on geography. These are all the same things. And
So
wine you can drink.
How'd you
know?
make that a vocation?
So that was a lot of good timing, lucky timing, right? It's the moment I got into it was the kind of, let's say, the early 2000s. And it was a time when wine was, how do you say, like was fatiguing from the Robert Parker kind of world, right? So, for people who are not knee deep in this or not inside baseball, there was a time when wine was made. Then there was a time where Robert Parker kind of ruled the roost. And it was the first time, perhaps, that there was a kind of stylistic unity where the market identified, okay, people like high alcohol, or they like more sugar, or they like
Big
new
fruit,
wood, or whatever
unctuous,
these
yeah.
things are, right? And it was a time when that was, and so people clamored around that. And frankly, it's easy to bash Parker and what he did and simplifying, but it's also like, it was a way of bringing it into millions of households, right? That is to some extent fueled where we are today, where we
True.
can talk about small production dorky
It's a
wine.
good peripheral point.
Yeah, it's like there's always a flip side, right? So it was a time when that narrative was beginning to break apart, and so I got lucky and went to, I was basically getting very serious about wine and was kind of doing it all on my own, and felt like at this point I was doing art, I was doing a bunch of other weird freelance shit, and I said, you know what? If I can work 1 or 2 days a week at a wine store, like make enough to just kind of like pay for my time there, but I'm doing other things. That's really where I make my bread. But I can buy wine at cost, and I can meet other people into wine. And so it was very much of just like, I'm going to meet people, hang out, buy some more wine. And it just was a good time. And so I was able to communicate. I'm a decent writer. I was able to kind of work on an email program and to do a little bit more digital marketing, which was at that time a kind of new idea.
Right.
And to do it outside of the rubric. That was the big breakthrough, was kind of doing this I'm not taking ownership of this. I was a part of a group that did this. But it was breaking away from the Parker thing and not, it's hard to think
Now,
about.
clear up something for
Yeah.
me. Is this something you were doing on your own, or you're already working somewhere doing this?
So this was the transition moment where I was collecting wines, getting really serious, and felt like I wanted to get into the biz. And so I applied to a number of different wine stores in New York, and it was hired at Crush.
Weren't they relatively new then?
Brand new. Yeah, so I think they opened in March of 2005, and I started working there June, something like this, right?
And from the opening, because if you go in there now, they're pretty committed to some, interesting wines
Yeah.
and depth and all of that. Was that the case at the beginning, or you guys in there, and there were a bunch of you, got them?
Yeah, no, from the beginning.
That was a vision?
Yeah, from the beginning, it wasn't my vision, but from the beginning, it was a kind of eclectic mix of kind of what we now call kind of geeky, eccentric wines and like high-end collectible. And that was the initial wine buyer there. That was his palate and his insight, and so from the beginning, it kind of was that.
So, Crush is a wine store that still exists in New York City
Yeah.
in the mid-high 50s
Yeah,
on
exactly.
the east side.
Yeah.
And it's considered, one of the better wine stores. So you're there. It's funny, whoever's there early on influences, what's going to be there, or where their
Yeah.
strengths or specialties become. So you kind of stay there for a while, grow through the ranks.
Yeah.
Just walk me through that.
Yeah, so basically, I was doing at the time, I studied art history, and art history it's a lot of essay writing, right? It's a lot of communication. It's a lot of formulating thoughts and kind of reducing them or distilling them into concrete ideas, right? Chunks. And so that was the time that the Parker narrative, so in other words, these, like 100 point, this was a time where email marketing was essentially Robert Parker, 98 points, 1999, right?
And a shelf talker.
A shelf talker, 3 words. It usually involved like jammy, right? But most important, it had the points and it had the price. So it all boiled, whether you had a sexy picture or not, or a graph, it all boiled down to $19.99, 97 points, or whatever your calculus was, right? 99 points, $24.99, whatever it is. And so Crush, and again, I'm not taking ownership. I was one of a team, but our insight, and not even our insight, our passion was just to be like, dude, it's not interesting. A lot of these wines we didn't really like. And it's looking back now, it feels very prescient. But at the time, going heavy in Burgundy and Germany and Austria and Northern Rhone and the Loire Valley and a lot of places that now are very staked out and established, it was a little bit more risky, right? We were certainly losing some money to the people doing like the Molly Dukers, if you remember those wines.
People
right?
would walk in and look for that.
Yeah, they'd want that stuff, and we didn't have it.
Did Wine Spectator have sway on what people would? Not as much as Parker?
I mean, I think they were all part of the voice. I don't think they were that much different in terms of what they were really celebrating, right? And so Crush's Insight and a number of other very good retailers, Chamber Street as well, like another one still exists. They were the ones searching for the stories, right? And selling. Crush, we made a point never to mention points. Even if we were selling a high-rated point, it was just like, dude, that's not important. What's important is the winemaker, the region he's coming from. And so we did pretty elaborate emails. I mean, the production value and the time spent on these emails in the long run worked. But at first I remember writing an email on Emidio Pepe. You know those wines?
Oh, sure.
It was called, and I still remember, it was one of the first emails
They were probably much cheaper then.
Oh, man, yeah. It was like, you get wines from the 70s and 80s that were,
crazy.
I don't know, $60, $70. But I remember working on this email, and we had a whole thing of like, where is the region and the grapes and how they do this. We had sidebars, pictures. I still remember the title was Ballerina in Boxing Gloves. And I spent probably like 2 days of work on this email.
Really?
When, content, breaking it down, looking at pictures, going through massive edits. How do we do this? Blah, blah, blah. And I think we sold like 8 bottles. But 3 years later, it was going well. So that was the break of telling a story, right? Of not using points, of using the more complicated narrative, of really going into the details. And now again, it seems obvious, but at the time it was a little bit of a leap of faith.
Did most people come in looking for a story and a recommendation, or a good deal of them had something in mind? Some could be swayed. But like you said, the Parkerization, you didn't have it, they walked out. I mean, how did that go at the very beginning?
At the very beginning, it was something we had to deal with for sure. And, compromises were made. I mean, there were certain big brands that we would have just because, you have 10 people a day walk in and want one wine, like after a while. And it was less dogmatic. It was honestly more as I think most great things are. It was driven by what you really care about. It's like everyone can say, man, I have this great idea for a company that does this. But if you don't want to spend your like morning, afternoon, and night thinking about this, it's not going to happen. You have to do something you actually give a shit about.
Right.
So it was less dogmatic. Like we didn't want to make money and selling these easy brands to sell. It was more, man, like what really keeps you going are these kind of geekier things. And it was just, again, it was good timing. It was the market was changing.
Yeah. And
it was viable. And we were ahead of the curve along with others as well, but we were along the curve. So to your question, would people walk in and 10% of them would be like, I want wine X. We don't have wine X.
But try this going on for $78. Well, that's a little pricey, and I don't know it.
But
you wish you bought 10 of them.
Yeah, people were ready for a change, and at the time, wines weren't that expensive, right? So you could sell people on Clos Roche Blanche, or you could sell people on a lot of the Dresdner book, a lot of the great Loire producers, frankly, the great Beaujolais producers, who now are still cheap, right?
Right, good values.
Yeah, and you could sell people on Briords and on.
So you spend how many years?
So I was there about 9 years, 8-9 years,
and
like that.
A bunch of questions. One, towards the end, what were you doing? Two, during the journey, where'd this love for these Teutonic, these Rieslings and German wines, and I know you were interested in other areas, and then the transition out of there. Walk me through all that.
Yeah, so beginning, I think my first official full-time. So basically, I remember going in there. I'm going to step one step back because it's fairly entertaining. I remember walking in there, and it's like I knew wine well enough, right? I had a good base level. So I walk in. I'd done a number of interviews, and kind of had to talk a lot about wine. It's like great. So I walk in, I think I'm a salesperson. And I'm working 2 days a week, I think, and I walk in. And they, oh, how you doing? Great, blah, blah, blah. And then sort of like, all right, head on into the stock room and there's a bunch of cardboard to break down. And I'm like, whoa. And, I don't know, I'm in my late, I think I was 28 or 29 at the time. And I'm like, and I either just got married or was engaged, like I'm a man, Sam, you know what I mean?
I ain't cutting boxes.
Yeah,
down.
and I call my wife and I go, at the same time I study art history and have no ego, so, it's like, whatever, man. I had no money, no ego, it's all good. But I remember calling my fiance and just going, I think I'm a stock boy. And she goes, that's okay, sweetie, that's okay.
Do you have one of those cutters?
Yeah, for sure, man, of course. So anyway, I start off as salesperson / stock boy. My first title was director of marketing. Basically, like I wrote the emails, right? That was...
Is that because you were the most literary and literate guy, or just...
Yeah, I think
default?
I could bloviate the most.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could string sentences together. So that's what I did, and as well as sales. So I did a lot of sales, and it was, that was the time when there weren't... Every email people got who were in the wine world, right, was, again, 98 points, 1999. So to get emails, it was like, we're pushing weird stuff, and we certainly would do... We do bigger brands, we do the wines but we would also do a lot of weird stuff, including German Austrian wines, Swiss wines, Loire wines were not that well known, right? So there was a whole diversity. And then from there, it became wine buyer with the wine buyer who's still currently there. So it was a partnership, honestly, it was always kind of a partnership. There were always like 2 to 3 to 4 key people doing stuff. I was one of them. And then my last title was wine director.
Okay.
So that meant, and this was a big issue. So it was going from being involved in wine day to day as buyer, author, writer, seller, to, the wine director it's basically general manager, right? It's
a little more.
Yeah, you're running
global.
Yeah, you're running the store. There's HR. There's a lot of non-wine things to deal with. And at that point, my interests, German and Austria, was a huge, huge interest of mine.
Just because you had the exposure?
I don't know.
They had the inventory. You liked it. I mean, why does that break through?
One of my first wine epiphanies was kind of German Austrian wines. It just has always been a passion. I like acidity. I like cool climate. Germany specifically, in the Mosel even more specifically, have a direct connection to land and to history, right? It's very much Burgundian, so it's a monastic culture that very much detailed the vineyard sites and everything else over hundreds of years. So there's just a lot, for a geek who wants to read books, there's a lot of raw material out there, and I like the wines. So it seemed like a natural fit. I also like the underdog, you know what I mean? It's... In terms of starting an import company, it's like, man, the world needs another French importer, it needs a hole in its head.
Right.
And there's a real dynamism in Germany right now, in Austria as well, and a lot of these countries, right? In as you go further east, in Hungary and Slovakia and a lot of these places, and they need champions. You know, it's like these other places don't. So I felt like with my cultural connection there, I speak German, fairly well. I'd studied the culture there. I still have my father's entire family still lives in Vienna. I still have a decent amount of family in Germany. It just felt like this is probably the battle I should choose. And some of it, I'm not a religious man, but some of it was spiritual. It's like I'd gone to Germany a number of times and I've been to a lot of wine regions, but there is something about walking through the Mosel where I'm just like, you know what I mean? There's a buzzing, everything works. You're like, I'm probably meant to be here.
So you're at the store 9 years. And you're starting to talk about that transition into why and how you became an importer. Tell me. So here's your love for German wines. There's a connection that's very deep emotionally, all of that stuff. How do you get from working in retail to really going out on a limb and start an importation company?
Yeah, I was lucky. So there was so to set the context here, right? German wine, if people know it at all, they think of the kind of 70s Liebfrau milk, Blue Nun, right? All that shit that's mass-produced.
Not even Riesling.
Yeah. It's all, sweet, mass production, commercial. It's a stable consumer product, but it's not necessarily an agricultural product. It's not necessarily a product that's reflective of the deeper culture there. And it's also, Germany, it's one small part of a really wide and diverse wine culture. And the Germans are very good at, focusing on what works and learning to kind of to mechanize it and to increase it, right? So sweet wines were sweet wines of the 70s. You know, the Liebfrau milk was the natural wine of the 70s, meaning it was the hip thing to do. Everyone wanted it. It was the cool wine. I talked to a number of importers.
It's crazy.
Who were starting in the 60s and 70s and were like, dude, you had to have German wine was like the $8 Montepulciano, man. You had to have that. That's what kept you like. That's what kept the lights on where you're trying to sell hard shit like Burgundy, right? And Piedmont, right? You had the German wine, pay the bills, keep the lights on. That was your bread and butter. And then you could like dabble in hard to sell shit like Northern Rhone and Burgundy and Loire, right?
But here's what I don't get. It disappeared.
Yeah. I mean, fashions do, right? Anything that...
But I mean cold.
Oh, yeah.
You know, nobody...
It's... You know what happened? It's one of these things. It's the quicker and the more dominant a force is, the quicker it goes down, right? Anything that rises, anything that shoots straight up, falls right to the ground. And it was a stylish thing within German wine, within the deeper historic context of German wine. Sweet wines are a part of it, but they were always a rarity. They're not easy necessarily to make, and they're more subtle wines. And so in the 60s and 70s, though, you know, it was a convergence of technology and everything else that they could all of a sudden produce mass quantities of these wines.
So that has to be one of the reasons for the misconceptions people have about, you know, German wine. I mean, Liebfraumilch is not Riesling, but Riesling is prominent. So they're like, I don't like that.
Yeah,
so,
100%. Yeah.
You know, so you kind of push people out of that. So go back. So you're leaving the store, and I was
trying to set the
timing and opportunity for you to transition, right?
I was trying to set the context of wine just because that was the German wine, right? That's what everyone knew, and that's one small part. And there's a huge diversity of grapes, of styles, of regions, of everything, right? And there was a small import company called Mosel Wine Merchant that had been started roughly the same time I was at Crush. So let's say, you know, 06, 07, something like that. And they were bringing in really small production German wines, focusing a little bit more on dry styles. And it was, I don't want to overplay it, but I don't want to it was not exactly a revelation because I knew some of these producers, I tasted some of the wines, but it was really the first time that there was someone intelligent in the market talking about these wines and trying to sell them, and we were huge supporters at Crush, Chambers Street, a number of other places. Really, and it was a really, really small boutique import company that had a good business, a good arc, but it was a smaller company. And then finally, the people kind of running it decided like that was for a number of reasons. I think the business was fine. It was more just they wanted to do other things, and so it kind of stopped. And so a number of the producers that I'd been supporting through this import company all of a sudden didn't have representation. And it was really about a time where I never thought necessarily about importing wine. That, you know, it's like I didn't wake up one day and it's like, I want to import wine. I had no idea like how it works. I frankly still don't. But what I did know is that I wanted
logistics.
It's logistics, man. It's just like, you know, moving containers and that shit. Yeah. Oh man, it tires my brain. But I did know I wanted to be close to the growers. I'd done by this point a number of trips to Europe and a number of trips to wine regions, and like to me, walking through the vineyards and meeting, like, they are the rock stars. They're the people.
You didn't want them to be unrepresented or left behind, right?
Yeah, it's just a really, you know, who knows why. You know, I could try and ascribe poetry to it, but you meet people, and I just knew I wanted to be close to the growers. And, you know, other people, and this is not judgmental at all, but other people in the business, you know, like the service element, right? They like, there's adrenaline in that. Other people like, in the retail game, you know, making the big sales and bringing, you know, these rare tranches, like, and I like all those things, but to me, being near the growers was a really like got me going. And so when the small import company decided to give up, I knew a lot of the producers. I literally happened to already have a trip booked. This like sounds too good to be true, but it's absolutely the truth. The week that the person told me the company was closing, I was going to Germany in a few days.
So you connected with the portfolio.
And you know, initially it really was like, I want to keep you guys in the U.S. market. I know a bunch of people. I know a bunch of SOMs. I know other retailers. Like, let's just keep this going. And naive, maybe, in the sense that, like, I don't want these people not to be in the market anymore. And sure enough, I go there. I talk with them. Everyone's like, great. And I'm like, listen, on the positive side, I think I know your wines probably better than anyone else does. I was your biggest customer by country mile, and they all know this. On the downside, like, I have no idea actually how to import wine.
The business part.
Yeah, nor do I actually have a company or anything. But
did you did you reveal that to these
Oh,
guys,
yeah,
or you
they
kept
knew.
it aside?
Yeah, no, they knew I was at Crush. They knew me as Steven.
No,
from-
but did you reveal like, okay, I'm willing to represent you, step in for Mosel, but honestly, I don't know how to get the wine out of here. And
Oh, yeah,
you
for
told
sure.
them all of
Yeah,
that. They weren't
absolutely.
like, so why would I go with you? Or they were like, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, some were.
Okay.
For sure. Honestly, this is the naive part, right? So I go there just thinking like, not that I'm the savior by any means, but like that I'm going to give them an opportunity they're not going to have, because otherwise, like, no one cares about German wine. And sure enough, like, some pretty serious people end up showing. So all of a sudden, I'm talking to growers and they're like, yeah, that's interesting. I'm giving my whole spiel like, listen, man, I know the wines. I love the wines. I want to sell them. They're like, okay, well, we have a meeting tomorrow with Louis Dresner. And it's like, wait, who?
Oh, boy.
It's like, all right, well, I'll take stage door left here and just exit
Right.
now.
Stay in touch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So thank you for the opportunity
Right.
and blah, blah, blah. And so at the end of the day, I did okay. A few producers went with Louis Dresner. There was a few other importers there that, picked up some growers as well. But I started with Lauer, Stein, and Weiser Kunstler were the first three.
Wait, slow down on
Sure.
that. So there were four
There were
producers,
four producers
that
said yes.
are emotional because they were your first four.
Exactly right.
They were good.
Yeah.
They're still with you.
Yeah.
They're still great.
Yeah.
Let's go over them again.
Yeah. So I should probably say it was five.
Five?
So it was Lauer, who's
Lauer.
Lauer. So
Okay.
this is a producer in the Saar in the Mosel.
Okay.
Who now has become a fairly, I work in such, it should be said just again for the wider audience, I work in a small niche of a small niche. So when I talk about like famous producers, I'm talking about, 5 to 10 to 20 degrees left of center, right?
Right.
This is in my little world. But Lauer's become a very important producer. I think it's established in Germany at large. Stein, who is a more eclectic, eccentric,
Right.
kind of bohemian producer, but in major markets, really well respected. I should say I'll go through and then I'll give my spiel. Weiser Kunstler, who's a incredibly respected, truly one of the great producers of the Mosel. They farm 4 hectares, so it's like I get zero wine from them a year. I mean, a lot of these, the logistics, when you really talk about numbers, I will show people my allocation sometimes, and it's I know for a number of my producers I'm their biggest buyer, but for Weiser Kunstler, I think this year was a tough year because of the vintage, but I think I got 20 cases of one of their cabinets for the United States of America, right? So it's, I don't know, that's 10 cases for New York and 2 cases each for 5 other states.
Spread
I mean,
it out.
it's not,
That's
these
crazy.
are insane amounts of wine, insanely small amounts of wine, right? This is why people in general don't do what I'm doing, because it is
Right.
like borderline inane,
One case is like 100 cases. It's the
Yeah,
same work.
exactly right. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
doing all the admin, all the compliance, all the same to move 10,000 cases versus 5 cases, right? So it doesn't make sense, except that I think the product is slightly better. I think people connect more with
Right.
that ideology, right? That in all the crap,
Totally.
in all the shit that's
So you
going
got
on
Lauer,
right now.
you got Stein.
I got Stein, Weiser Kunstler, and then this young producer Julian Hart,
Haart.
Haart. There's a
Right.
lot of Harts in the
But
Mosel,
Julian,
but
Julian.
yeah, Julian. Yeah.
Okay.
So really small producer who's it was his first vintage when I was starting. 2011 was just the first that he kind of made on a commercial scale, at least. And then this other guy, Keller, who's a really big name in German wine. Do you know Klaus-Peter Keller?
Keller.
Yeah, Keller. So he makes, he was one of the first to really focus on making dry wines and has become very much a cult figure.
Yeah.
Just to put it in context, his top dry wines at this point sell for, $1,000, $2,000 a bottle. So, and he was someone I met years and years and years and years ago, kind of before he was a rock star, just being really interested in German wine. And we became very, very good friends. So when I started my company, he said, listen, I have importers from most states, but any state I'm not working in, you can work in. So I started with him. So those were kind of the initial 5.
Pretty lucky.
Yeah, for sure.
That, those were the guys available.
Yeah.
Stephen, we have to take a break. It's a good time to cut out. When we come back, let's talk about the wines specifically.
Yeah.
We'll talk, more about some of the producers. I want to talk about varietals and a bunch of other things. And I want to talk about Riesling Fire, which is really a celebration of all these guys, how you bring them to the public. We're talking to Steven Bitterolf. Steven is the creator of Riesling Fire, which is a big Riesling Fair coming up in New York. We're talking about his import company, Von Boden, and we'll talk about a little more. You're listening to the Grape Nation. We'll be back in a minute or so.
Today's program is brought to you by Korin, a supplier of Japanese chef knives and restaurant supplies. Korin is proud of their Japanese culture and traditions, but they want you to know that their products are not just for Japanese restaurants. Their knives and tableware bring out the best qualities of food from every culture and fit into every restaurant from French to Pan-Asian to American. And that is why they're located in New York City, where people from every country in the world come to eat. Korin's Tribeca showroom is home to the most extensive collection of Japanese chef knives in the world, including Japan. Stop by to view their exquisitely designed tableware and the rarest natural sharpening stones. They have a whole range of knife services from repair and rust removal to reshaping and realigning. Korin is dedicated to this ideal, bringing the highest quality Japanese design to your table so you can experience the unparalleled quality of Japanese craftsmanship in your home or restaurant. For more information, visit Korin.com.
All right, we're back. We're back with my guest, Stephen Bitterolf. Stephen is the proprietor of Von Boden and the creator of Riesling Fire, which we'll all get into. We got an idea of how Stephen got the business started, and he's being a little humble because some of the winemakers that he talked about are truly cult figures and rock stars now. Which is interesting because when you started Von Boden, and I think you laid it out a little, I think you have had a mission, a philosophy. You know, I think it's to be small, your aspirations are not, tell me about that. What's the philosophy of the company?
Yeah, for sure. That's critical. So, let me just go straight to, the question is the one ideology that I have and I believe deeply in is small scale. We can talk within the wine world, and frankly, it's very easy to jump from wine to just agriculture, right? So to food and frankly to consumerism and to the world at large. But I do feel like scale is the most important thing, right? So within wine specifically, we can talk about organic viticulture, we can talk about biodynamic viticulture, we can talk about sulfur, about filtration, about a million different topics, right? And we can have very informed, intelligent opinions about these things. But really, to me, what's most important is the scale of it, which is to say a person in a place making good judgments based on their relationship with the land. Right? There's an old Mennonite saying, and I don't know the exact saying, but the philosophy is basically like the Mennonites do not work with tractors with rubber tires because rubber tires allow you to drive further and to do more work, and it begins to skew the decisions being made. So if you're working on just a wheel with an iron wheel and you're driving on that, you have to go slower, you have to be more thoughtful, and it limits the amount of land you can farm. It limits the amount of produce you can make. It's a natural limitation that they put on that believe that it's a more thoughtful and engaged.
So those are the type of producers.
Those are the type of producers.
That are important, and based on what you said, they're not jumping on a tractor and doing 28 hectares.
For sure
There are small producers that are very connected to the land.
Yes.
We forget it's an agricultural product.
Exactly right. Yeah.
So that's who you.
That is, and this goes across. So the majority of the book is the heart of the book is in Germany for sure. That said, I have producers in Austria and France, and now a few domestic producers as well in the U.S. And that is the one correlating tie is that they are all small producers, and that is
the philosophy for the producers.
Exactly right.
They all buy
exactly right. And it's not to say too that you can't make good wine on, and frankly, even great wine on a larger scale. I don't know that it's the relationship I think is best to have with the universe, nor oftentimes does it make the most interesting wines. Again, we can get very meta on all this, but what do you really want in a bottle of wine? You want it to be delicious. That's important. Right. But frankly, I'd rather have an okay wine from a good human being than an awesome wine from Satan. Yeah, just to make it
I
make
think,
it blatant, huh?
I think there is a movement towards that. I mean, you
I
and
hope
I
so.
are sitting in a studio in Roberta's, which is ground zero for an eye towards, natural wines and all of that. Sustainability.
Yeah.
A recognition to the grower and all of
Yep.
that. So we're in a good place that way, and
Yeah.
I think that's important for what you're doing. I'm just curious, when you got out of Germany a little, did people pursue you, in the U.S. or France, or you thought, hey, what the hell, I'm starting to figure this out. Let me talk to this guy, that guy. How'd the
That's an interesting
portfolio
question, yeah.
expand beyond?
I don't even know that I can. I'm trying to think. So, I'm trying to think what the first producer outside of Germany was. I believe it was a French producer, Migaud, which is in Lorraine. And so, a lot of this it's just life, right? It happens to be that my wife's family, a lot of them are from Alsace, from Strasbourg, right? So when I'm in Trier, it's about, I don't know, depending how quickly you drive and the routes you take, it's about 2 hours south from Trier to Strasbourg. And so I drive through the Lorraine, and I'm interested in these regions, right? When you're driving through Europe, if you're curious, it's easy to go to Bordeaux, and it's easier to go to the Piedmont. It's easy to find these places that, all signs point to. You've read a million books about them. They're on billboards. But wine was a product and is a product that's produced in a million places by a million different people.
Unbelievable.
And the ones that are famous for reasons that may or may not have anything to do with the quality of the wine, right? They may be close to a river. That tends to be, historically speaking, the reason why places are famous. Like the reason that Bordeaux is a huge product historically is because it's really damn close to a big river. And it's the same with the Mosel, right? And Burgundy was in the shadows for a long time because it's harder to move. That's a bigger point. But the point is that there's a lot of little cultures, and some are celebrated and some are not necessarily based on the quality, but just based on, historical factors that are in someone's control or not. So the Lorraine to me is wildly interesting. The Lorraine, for people who don't know, is it's a large swath of France on the eastern side, kind of above Alsace, basically heading east from Paris, right? And it's this whole area. It just was a huge viticultural area. There were 2 world wars that were fought basically in this area, switched back from France to Germany multiple times. There's bad phylloxera there as well as in lots of parts of France, but it had a lot of things that really knocked it down. And so there are not many acres under vine anymore, but it's also, because of this, it's also one of the cheaper areas to live, right? It's one of the cheaper areas to make wine, to buy vineyard sites, and there's real terroir there. So I would drive through this area.
Found a producer.
Yeah, so I found a producer who was recommended by...
So you were intrigued and interested in the area.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Kind of hit the road and let me see if I
Yeah.
can get one of these.
There were, when you really get into this business at the level I'm at, it's not like I'm at a very sophisticated level, but I spend a lot of my time talking with people, right? And Psalms tell me things, retailers tell me things. People travel a lot and they go, man, I was at this place and this wine was great. You should look into it. And I kind of have a little flip book and I keep this stuff in.
A lot of good intel.
Yeah, and so it's I go visit them, and 1 out of 100 tend to be what people say they are, right?
That's great. Let's talk about, like I said when we took the break, we could talk about this stuff for 5 hours. But let's talk about the grapes and the varietals, that make these wines. Germany has built a reputation on the greatness, really, of a single grape.
Yeah, for sure.
What I want you to do is discuss other grapes. We talked about Riesling, and we know Germany's built around Riesling. But I think we're at an exciting point, where other grapes and producers are starting to spend time with these grapes. So let's talk about Germany beyond, Riesling. What's happening? What's good? What's in your portfolio that you feel is important?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say, let's begin that discussion with saying, in the great hierarchy of the wine world universe, right? Many people, and I'd probably be one of them, will say that Riesling and Pinot Noir are at the apex, whether they're the best or it's these are questions that I'm not very interested in, to be perfectly honest, but they are close to the apex, right? These are very noble grapes with deep histories. They can age. They show sight very specifically. These are among the gods of the grapes, right? That said, diversity. You don't always want to listen to Beethoven. Sometimes you want to just chill out and listen to
Zeppelin.
A little Zeppelin, or I don't know, the band down the street, right? That just has a good little tune. And And so there's different places for all sorts of things. And Germany, as with France, as with Italy, as with Spain, has a wildly diverse region, right? These are all little farming communities that kind of found their ways over centuries, and then there was more travel, there's more communication, and they blended a little bit. I think the analogy to make the comparison to make that maybe is interesting is Italy specifically, because Italy, I feel like, is one of those countries that just did an incredibly good job of maintaining diversity and celebrating diversity, right? For sure, there's Sangiovese and there's Barolo and there are the quote-unquote greats, but there are a trillion DOCs there, a trillion different little regions, a bazillion grapes, and they all kind of are celebrated. They all have their voice, and they're not necessarily equal, but they're all celebrated, right? You talk to people very into Italian wine and very educated about it. And man, you will talk about the great historic Barolos with the same gusto that you talk about a white wine from Liguria, right? It's like these different places have a different
Sicily,
they have a different vibe, a different flavor, a different geography, but they're all the diversity, the diversity of it is what makes it awesome, right? In Germany, as with France and a lot of the other places, it is exactly the same way in terms of the diversity, but in terms of the way the culture has celebrated is wildly different, right? So Germany made this hierarchy around Riesling because, one, it is such a great grape, as I said earlier, but two, because it was incredibly successful, both historically.
I was going to say, way back.
Yeah, going to the 18th, the end of the 19th
Kings were
century.
Drinking Riesling like over Bordeaux in the old days.
I mean, when you go back to the old, and you can still find these in cities. There was, when I was traveling in New Orleans a few years ago, someone gave me a wine list from a restaurant in New Orleans from the 1890s, and it is
a lot of Riesling.
It's a lot of Riesling, and it's Bordeaux, and they're all priced about the same. Oftentimes, the Riesling's more expensive, right? And Burgundy is pretty cheap, comparatively speaking. But in the 1890s to the early 20th century, German white wine was the most expensive wine on the face of the earth.
Crazy.
And then there are 2 world wars. There's a lot of nonsense. And then in the 70s, it becomes fashionable again, right? So it has these spikes and then it has these valleys. And German, it's always been about Riesling. But the truth of the matter is it's a really diverse, really diverse
So let's
world.
talk about some interesting grapes. Let's focus on what's seeing some growth, what's available, who's committing to it.
All right. Let's see here. Just ask the question back to you. You mean like what I'm being successful with, or what's just kind of the market's interested in, or what I think is cool? Because these are all.
I think all of that.
All right.
And what your growers
Yeah.
are committing
Yeah.
some of the land to.
Yeah.
That type of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So I would say the Burgundian varietals, at least the varietals we associate with France and at large, right? So we're talking Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris. These are all varietals that have been grown in Germany for centuries. So they are, while we think of them naturally as more French, that is their homeland. And I'm not going to sit here and argue that the greatest ones don't come from France or not Germany, but they have a long history in Germany. They have a long relationship with various geographies there, and I think they're making some extraordinary wines there.
If you take something like Pinot Gris, it's not called Pinot Gris.
Yeah, exactly. So Germany, it's a different language. It's not. It's German. So they tend to call these the Burgundian varietals, so Burgunder.
So they use the word Burgunder.
They use Burgunder, and then they put the colors there, right? So Grau is gray. Blanc, Weiss is white, right? So it's
so Weiss Burgunder
is Pinot Blanc.
Okay. Pinot Gris,
Grau Burgunder,
and is Pinot Noir Pinot Noir?
No, Pinot Noir is the late. Within Germany, for whatever reason, I don't know where the origin of this is, but it's the late harvest Burgundy. So it's Spät, which is late in German. So it's Spätburgunder. So you have Weiss Burgunder, Pinot Blanc, Grau Burgunder, Pinot Gris, and then Spät, late Burgundy, which is Pinot Noir.
And then you recently got a nice shout out from Eric Asimov in the New York Times for a wine that we haven't even mentioned.
Yeah, Sylvaner.
Man,
my next one for sure would be Sylvaner, because Sylvaner is, again, probably not at the top of the apex, right up there with Riesling, but man, it's second lieutenant to Riesling. Sylvaner is a profoundly noble grape, and by that, what does that mean? Noble grape refers to just a grape that one can express something unique about a place, meaning it tastes different if you plant it in various places, and two, that it can age and develop and change, right? And so Sylvaner does all that. Sylvaner planted in limestone versus Sylvaner planted in sandstone tastes completely different. It is a profound grape, and yeah, that was...
So isn't that truly satisfying? When,
Yeah.
Asimov,
Yeah.
who's a good guy,
Yeah.
who, the Times is very...
Huge.
Reputable.
Yeah.
He picks 20 wines.
Oh, dude.
You're one
12.
of them. Was it 12?
Yeah, well, there's two articles, right?
Yeah, you're right.
There was an article about Sylvaner that came out in the fall, and,
Right.
And the whole premise of the article was, why doesn't anyone care about Sylvaner?
Right.
And it was more rooted in Alsace because there's a long tradition there as well. And they mentioned Vetter, so this producer I work with, but the whole thing was Sylvaner is so incredible. Why doesn't anyone drink Sylvaner? Which is,
Does that complicate things? Now consumers or restaurants or wine stores want it. And, we talked about how you're a small producer guy.
Yeah, these things, the wine world and the momentum of consumers and wine stores and restaurants is, it's a big ship. So you turn the wheel a little bit, and it's not like it turns on a dime, right? It's over time. So I'd be lying if I said, one article, honestly, unless the wine's under $20 and widely available, I don't know that it steers it so quickly.
Right.
But it's incredibly important for the larger discussion and to have people thinking about it and saying, Asimov is a great writer and a huge personality in the wine. So having him say that these are important, that puts
Reputable and well followed.
That puts
so.
thousands and thousands of eyes, which is great.
He's
This
also
is important.
validating what you're championing, which is a
Yeah,
nice thing.
yeah.
which I
No,
like
for
to
sure.
hear. All right. We have about 10, 11 minutes left.
Man, come on.
We got to jam in a lot of things. So
All
I
right.
want to move into 3 areas.
Let's do it.
1, I want to talk about Riesling Fire.
Yeah.
2, I want to subject you to our wine list, which is 5 questions.
All right.
And 3, if we can, let's just pick one of the wines you brought in,
Rad.
taste
Okay.
it, talk about it,
Yeah, cool.
and get on it. Okay, so Riesling Fire. Explain to people what Riesling Fire is.
Yes.
And why you did it.
Rad. Okay. So people have probably heard of Oktoberfest.
Right.
So fest in German is like a party, and a fire, it's spelled F-E-I-E-R, fire, is a celebration. It's a little bit more of a formal term, right? So it's Riesling Fire. So we're not lighting anything on fire. This is more a celebration. So basically it was a way of, there's a number of events. I founded it about 7 years ago, so it's been some time. And back then, there were already a few events, La Palais probably being the most famous. That is, it's basically, it all comes back to a harvest celebration, right? When the harvest was brought in, everyone would get together, thank the gods, thank whoever you thank for these sorts of things, have the bounty of the harvest there, and bring out really nice bottles to share with the community, right? So it's 2 things. It's 1, a celebration of the bounty, of the harvest of a year, spent circling around the globe and celebrating what happens then. And 2, of sharing, of bringing things that are really special to you and opening them with people who you understand will be special too. And so this has been done in Burgundy really successfully. And I thought, you know what, man, I know Germany and Riesling is and probably always will be a bit of a niche geek thing. But I know there are people who really care deeply about this. It's a little bit about being a baseball card collector, right? It's you're not going to run into that many people at a dinner party.
You got that right, though.
Yeah, they're not that many people, but at the same time, when you meet someone, they care. They care deeply, right?
So there's 2 elements to the fire.
Yeah, so the fire is basically a big celebration of German wine. There's 2 events. One is a grand tasting, what I call the grand tasting, which is in New York City, January 19th. So it's a week from this Saturday at Craft Restaurant. And it is all the growers that are coming in. This year it is from Germany and Austria. There's about, I think, 12 or 11 growers from Germany and 3 from Austria. And they will be opening, each one will be opening 3 wines.
So you're looking at up to 50 wines, 50 wines.
Yeah, around 40
so it's
wines.
a walk around.
It's a walk around tasting.
Winemakers at the table,
Exactly.
right? Some great New York Psalms.
Exactly. So there's New York Psalms there pouring. There's 14 winemakers. They're opening 3 bottles each. It's $35, and you get to taste with some real legends, including Egon Mueller, Keller is there, and then a lot of what It's always my mix is blue blood and new blood, so it's the established guard, and then the young people who are doing cool stuff. So Julian Hart, who I spoke about earlier, is coming in. Ava Fricke, who's a young woman in the Rheingau, is making incredible wine. She'll be there. So it's a lot of it's a diverse group. It's neither, the old school aristocrats nor all the punk
You're
rockers.
not getting a collection in a room like
Yeah,
that. And
it's
to taste for, what'd you say, $35?
It's ridiculous.
January
19th, so a week from this Saturday.
And then in the spirit of
Yeah.
La Paule
Yeah, exactly.
and the
Yeah.
harvest festivals. You do a big dinner.
Exactly right. So then that evening, so it's basically a 1-day event, right?
Right.
So during the day, it's this, tickets available now. I think the 2 shifts still available, or something like 1:30 to 3:30, or something
There's
like that.
tickets available for the
Yep.
walk around tasting.
Yep.
There's multiple shifts.
Exactly
but a
right.
few are
Yeah, we
still
do
available.
exactly. Yeah.
So,
and
if
all the
people
info-
are interested, they
Exactly
can move
right.
on that.
Yep, and it's all RieslingFire.com. So Riesling and then
That's your contact.
FEIER.com.
Now, what about the dinner?
So the dinner then that night is with all the growers as well, and this is 10 people at a table. There's 14 growers, so 140 people total, and it's just everyone brings the greatest wines they have, and we crack
So
them
there's
open.
wine there, and people bring wine.
So all the growers bring kind of rare
Right.
wines from their
and
cellars.
then the collectors and
people
guests
are
bring them.
encouraged. It's no one checks you at the door,
Right.
right? But it's encouraging. It's all in the spirit of sharing. And honestly, and this happens to me all the time. It's like you buy a really nice bottle of wine, but like you don't want to open it on Tuesday by yourself or someone who doesn't care. It's like this is the opportunity to open those bottles that people. You want to share them with people who care, and in this room,
Are there a
people who
few
care.
tickets left for
There are
that?
a few tickets left for
It's
that as
at
well.
Reynard at
It's
the Wythe
exactly
Hotel.
right. Yep.
So if you can make it to Brooklyn
Yep.
that night, January 19th,
And you will taste German wines that you.
These guys pull out
it's
some-
serious, yeah. I've had a number of German producers, including Katharina Prüm from the famous estate J.G. Prüm, Egon Mueller, Keller as well, who just said, "I've never seen this much great German wine in Germany, let alone outside of Germany."
So if you love German wines, Riesling Fire is really a well-curated collection by a guy who's very passionate about it. You could do the tasting, you could do the dinner, you could do both.
Yeah.
RieslingFire.com,
Exactly right.
RIESLING
Yep. Riesling.
FEIER.
Yep, FEIER. Yep.
All right, so that's what is now Stephen's annual event. All right, let's buzz through the wine list quickly. I got 5 questions. I ask all my guests this. Don't overthink these.
All right.
Don't overdwell
Spontaneous,
on
I
it.
got you.
All right. First question is, what are you drinking now? What's on your table? Is it for business, personal? Is it seasonal?
I mean, it's wine, right?
Yeah, but
It's-
give me a little
So,
more.
but I'm drinking the wines we have here, right? I'm drinking a lot of. I would say during the winter, it tends to be a little bit more light red. So I'm drinking some.
So you're moving because of the
tend
season to
be,
a little more
a
reds
little bit,
and all of that.
and richer kind of whites.
Give me 1 or 2 things that you're loving right now.
So there's a producer coming in for Riesling Fire, Jochen Beurer.
Spell the last name.
Beurer.
Okay.
And he's in Swabia, which is a little bit further south near Stuttgart, most famous for Mercedes and BMWs. So he makes all different. It's not just Riesling land. He does Trollinger, which is Chiava in Italian. He does a lot of different Cabernets, Portuguese. Or there's all sorts of reds that are just like tangy, bright, and delicious.
All right, so that's what you're drinking now. How about this wine list is the Riesling edition.
All right.
Okay,
Gotcha.
everything relates
Gotcha.
to Riesling. Favorite wine and food pairing? Do you have one, or you don't think about it? Is there something you come back to?
You know what?
Something so logical?
Yeah, I would say in general, and something probably counterintuitive for people who aren't knee deep in this stuff, is dry Riesling, which is incredibly high acid, really sharp cut with any kind of crudo, right? So whether it's like scallops, whether it's excuse me, shrimp or even oysters, right? Anything that's a little
Crudo
fat
is a raw fish
tends to
that's
be a raw fish,
seasoned.
exactly right.
It could
Yeah.
have some citrus or oil in it.
because that fattiness, the acid cuts through it, and people, it's always like Riesling is good with spicy foods. It's like, well, dry Riesling is really
so
good
dry Riesling and a good fresh
with. Oh man,
Crudo.
or even
Go-
muscadet, man, or muscadet, oysters. Like crack
Right.
open an oyster and
Okay.
put the muscadet away.
So
and
that's
dry
that's
Riesling.
the German answer to champagne and oysters, or
Yeah,
muscadet
exactly
and
right.
oysters,
Yep.
which is good.
dry Riesling and oysters.
All right.
Pass that on.
You've been around town a lot. I don't want you to leave anyone out, be inclusive,
man.
exclusive. But in the context of German wines, favorite or good wine restaurant and or bar that has good attention towards, a German, Austrian wine list?
Killing me, Sam. I'm gonna not say someone and be in trouble. I would say to go old school, the old school French restaurants do it better than a lot, right? Danielle, Jean Georges, these places are pouring.
Aldo Somme,
yeah,
Le
Le
Bernardin.
Bernardin as well. Like they know, right? The acid of Riesling works so well with
Guys
food.
like Raj Vadia, they
For
know
sure.
all that stuff.
So they're doing an incredibly good job. And then you move downtown, and honestly, it's like, man, Roberta's right here. They do a
Roberta's.
decent amount, man. They know what they're doing. Stella, Cafe Altro, those places are doing a lot. You know, and
They're
it's Germany and
fans.
Austria for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, big.
Yeah, so by saying them and not saying company or Racine, they're all
They're
doing
all-
a great
yeah,
job.
they're all doing a good
So
job,
there's
yeah.
a lot of
For sure.
There's a lot of good places for that. All right, you've drank enough wine. You've had to have something that is a favorite all time, and that doesn't mean necessarily the most expensive,
Right.
the most rare. What's that wine that you had, through your travels that moved you?
Man, it's always hard to pick like one wine,
Give me a
right?
couple then.
Yeah,
or
let's
give
say.
me the experience.
Yeah.
And what was the wine with it?
Yeah, okay. You know what I would say? Let me give you a genre. Can I do that?
Yeah.
All right. My genre would be older cabinets, right? So, for people who don't know, German Riesling is often organized along this hierarchy of sweetness. So you go
From
from
dryness to sweetness.
Exactly.
Go
So
through it.
Yeah, so you'll see trocken or dry, which means dry. Feinherb or halbtrocken means like slightly off dry. And then this is a newer hierarchy established in the early 70s, but cabinet is the first level. And cabinet, think of it as a style indicator, right? It just tells you kind of what the wine's going to be like. Usually it means it's going to be slightly off dry, have a little residual sugar, but be light and have a lot of acidity. And these are wines historically that are thought of is good wines, but they're kind of little brother to the Spätleses and Ausleses and the noble dessert wines, right? But Cabernet to me has all the best of the dry wine world, meaning lots of acidity, lots of vibrancy, energy, but a little bit of residual sugar that gives it complexity and layers. And these Mama Jamas, man, you can age, right? So from one of my producers, JB Becker, released a little bit of 75 Cabernet to me.
How
And
was it?
the wine is like just
Lively
it's
and-
energetic
Really?
and angelic, transparent. It tastes like satin, salt, and lemon. I mean, it's just absolutely haunting. Another perennial favorite of mine is von Schubert in the Ruhr Valley, who has cabinets from the 80s. It's a shout out to Raj Vaidya. 88, number 67. That's a vintage 88, cast 67.
Right.
It's just like a legendary bottle of wine.
All right, good answers.
All right.
See, it wasn't that hard.
All right.
All right, I ask everyone this, and if you could fit your stuff in, put it in. If there's something else that makes sense. What's the best Riesling wines we could buy for around $15-20 that are accessible, reasonable, a little cool?
Yeah.
Retail.
Retailing 15, 20 bucks. All right, easy. I can do that. Yeah. So I would say I'm gonna start with Stein just because I think he's a really interesting
You
producer.
can get Stein for about $20?
Yeah,
Okay.
so he has two entry-level producers. So Stein is just Stein. It means rock
Right.
in Germany. And what's interesting about Stein is he's farming these forgotten lands in the Mosel. So he has really old vines. So for about, one is called Blauschiefer Trocken, just means blue slate dry. And this is a wine that's made largely from 80 to 90-year-old ungrafted vines, everything hand done,
Wow.
just incredible viticulture, incredible winemaking. And the wine is $18. And for no reason other than no one knows where this region, where his little part of the Mosel is. These are not famous vineyards, and German wine at large, right? It's silly.
So give me one more.
One more, 15.
Wait,
Yeah,
that was a red?
that's a white. That's
That's
a
the
dry
white.
Riesling, right?
You said Riesling. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
and then for a Pinot Noir, there's a producer I work with called Shelter that's in Baden. So we're about a half-hour drive from Strasbourg, really close to Alsace, and just make delightful Pinot Noirs
In
that are a
that
little bit
price
more
range?
angelic. Yeah, there's one called Lovely Lily. It's the one critter wine I import. It has a picture of their dog who they love, and his name is Lily. And the wine's, about $17-18, and it's just a vibrant, beautiful Pinot Noir on
Can
limestone.
you find them at the better and obvious
For sure.
wine stores
Yes.
in New York?
Yeah,
the
you'll find them.
Chambers
Yes,
and
you'll find them.
Flatiron or whatever.
Yep.
All right. We're going to wrap the show up, but as we're wrapping the show up,
do
I
it.
want you to pick one of the wines.
right,
Let's talk about it. And
Bring your glass on over here there, Sam.
I'm getting up.
All right.
I don't care.
So I'm pouring a Pinot Noir. I think,
All right.
in the context of can we look at one bright part of
Matt, get
of
some
climate
of this Pinot
change?
Noir.
So
Give Maddie a little.
I have a sense that in 20 years, German red wines will be as famous, if not as famous as German
That's
white
what
wines.
I wanted to get to earlier.
mean,
that
it's-
reds are breaking through. So there's going to be some recognition to red wine.
sure.
So we're drinking a German Pinot
We're drinking
Noir.
a German
Who's the
Pinot
maker?
Noir. Wassenhaus is the name of the producer.
Spell for me.
Wasen. So
Okay.
Wassen, you'd say, I guess, in English. And Haus is Haus. And this is interesting, Sam, because this is at Baden as well, really close to the French border. And there is a massive dialogue now, right? Where a generation ago, the parents didn't talk. If you were in France or you were in Germany, you didn't talk, right? The younger generation they travel back and forth constantly. So these are two Germans who have done a lot of work in Burgundy. One of them, and frankly, still works at De Monty, a famous estate in Burgundy. And they make just a little bit of Pinot Noir and Weissburgunder in Baden, and it is like among the greatest
Now,
German
is
reds
this,
I've had in a long time.
I don't want to ask the wrong questions or sound stupid, but is this a typical or a good representation of German Pinot? Or because of the area they're in, it's a little different?
It is a good representation of what German Pinot can be.
Okay,
I think it's
so that's
kind
a good thing.
Yeah,
because you got your hands on what it should be. You're not hacking
yeah.
what it is.
I think a big problem. Germany has been able to grow red grapes for a few decades. This is not a totally new thing, but they didn't quite know how to élevage them, how to age them, right? How to like mature them. And now, as I've said, there's a tremendous amount of dialogue. So both these guys were in Burgundy for a long time. These barrels are from Burgundy.
So they got.
So they know how to do
chops.
it now. So there's a little more balance, a little more freshness there. But it's distinctly German. It's called Vulkan. It's referring to the soil type. So this is an area with a lot of volcanic soils, and that's pretty unique to Baden.
So let's just do the vitals. The color is a typical German Pinot. What is that?
Yeah.
A garnet or?
Yeah, you tell me. I'm not a color. I'm a color
It's like a beautiful ruby.
Yeah, it's a light. Let's say a light red, right?
Yeah. Give me nose descriptors on this one.
You know, with volcanic soils, typically you get wild aromatics, and wild just meaning effusive. There's a lot of them, and tend to get a little bit more spicy, right? There's
Beautiful
smoke,
aromatics.
yeah,
Though. Little smoke.
yeah, a little smoke,
spice,
a little kind of game.
but
There's like dried herbs,
All integrated though.
for sure.
Nice. All right, mouthfeel.
Let's
It's
do it.
that typical sort of medium.
I mean, again, typical. I think typically most German Pinot Noir is not that exciting, so I think these are atypical, but it's typical of the potential that can be there, right?
It's got a nice mouthfeel. It's
A little lighter, a little more delicate, but
Yeah.
some structure to it. So they're doing a little bit of a whole cluster, so it has a little, little grip to it. Let's say.
and the palate. Does the nose transfer to the palate, or tell me some palate stuff?
I just like making the noise. Palate is just 100% delicious. It's that light, angelic kind of red Pinot Noir fruit with so much just complexity. There's like herbs, there's dirt, there's rock, there's game, there's smoke,
Yeah,
there's
that's
meat, right? There's like some
Yeah.
like bloody meat there.
That's an interesting wine. It almost sounds like a northern Rhone. You're
it does a
talking
little
about.
bit, yeah. That's the volcanic
But
soil. man.
it's a nice wine. I mean, you won't be disappointed. Tell me the wine again.
So Wassenhaus. So they are. This is a.
What's the vintage year?
This is. That's a good question. 2016, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 2016. It's called Vulkan. VULK, and just
'Cause of
referring to the
volcanic?
volcanic soils.
All
Exactly right.
I'm going to post everything on our social media. I'm going to
Rad.
post your wine list answers, and I'll post, the wines that we've been drinking. Before I leave here, let me get a snap. Stephen, I have to thank you. We're going to wrap things up. I just got to do a few notices, and then I'm going to get you out of here. If you have a question, suggestion, wine happening, or event, hit me up at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's sam@thegrapenation.com. Follow us on Facebook at The Grape Nation. Follow us on Instagram at SBenruby, and follow the hashtag The Grape Nation. On Twitter, we're at BenRuby. Also subscribe to the Grape Nation podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Like I said, we're going to post Steven's wine list, and we're going to post the weekly wine sip, and I'll post some of the other wines that we drank, and certainly some of the other wines that Steven mentioned. Couple more things. Steven, where could we find you on social media? On Von Boden?
Yeah, exactly. So Vom Boden is VOMBODEN. So it's Vom like from Boden, which is earth, so from the soil.
Right. So that's Twitter and Instagram.
Twitter and Instagram. I don't think I'm on Facebook. I'm not sure.
You are.
I am. There you
You
go.
are. I
Awesome.
searched and I found.
Oh, there we are.
And let's go over one more time.
Yes.
If you want more info on Riesling Fire,
Yes.
which is coming up in a few
Yeah,
weeks,
it's a week
which is
from this
why
Saturday.
I asked
Yeah.
you to come on. We're actually on vacation this week.
Yeah.
Our season starts next week, but next week would have been too
you.
late.
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
talked Matt into coming in.
Rad, thank you.
So that we could do that.
Yeah.
So you still have a few tickets left for the dinner
Yep.
and for the tasting.
Yeah.
So
And let me make one heartfelt plea, if I may, Sam.
Go
Just
ahead.
because for Riesling Fire, so it is a week from this Saturday, and the gala dinner will be, if you're into these wines, will be an experience you won't forget. It's it's $300 some bucks, so it's not nothing.
but it's reasonable against all
Oh,
those
the
other
spectrum of everything else,
lalas.
right? But if you're not into that, the grand tasting is just in the middle of the day at Craft Restaurant, which is right in Manhattan. It's easy to get to. It's $35, and you are going to be tasting with literally some of the greatest legends of German and Austrian wine. and you're going to taste nearly 40 wines. And like, come, if you're active in the wine and food world at all, or you're just kind of into it, right? Interested in
Right.
it, you probably hear from people constantly like, Riesling's great, German wines, they sure are coming around. Like, come taste, spend $35 and come see. And like, if you don't leave happy, then I'm wrong.
I said it earlier. It's an incredible value. It's an incredibly passionate and well-curated list. And it's more than an entree into this. It's sort of hitting,
it's a little bit of a master course for $35.
Yeah, it's hitting the right spot. So that's rieslingfire.com, RIESLINGFEIER. And you can go to their website. On another note, I told my friend Daniel Jonas that I would talk about one of his lalas. Right. Daniel from La Paulé has created La Table, a daytime tasting and an evening dinner celebrating the wines of the Rhone Valley, North and South, on Saturday, February 2nd in New York City. Visit latablenewyorkcity.com for more info. So like Stephen was saying, there's a lot of festivals going on. Yeah. There's a Barolo festival coming up. There's been Champagne. Yeah. It's nice.
Yeah, it's
fun, and I'm glad you got your foot in the door and, representing Riesling. I want to thank our guest, Stephen Bitterolf. Stephen is the creator of Riesling Fire. Get online, get out there, try that. And he is the proprietor of Von Boden, which we talked about, curates and imports some delicious German wines and other wines from around the country. I want to thank our engineer, Matt. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Matt.
I'm Sam Ben Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation.
Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content and to hear about exclusive events, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at heritage_radio. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be a part of the food world's most innovative community? Rate the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join our community by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.